Have you ever wondered why certain people suddenly walk out of your life without warning, without explanation? Just gone. It hurts, it confuses, and it leaves you questioning what went wrong. But what if it wasn't something going wrong? What if it was something going right? What if their absence was God's presence, quietly at work, protecting your purpose in ways you couldn't yet see? God is more concerned with your eternal growth than your temporary comfort. This truth stands at the center of understanding why God sometimes removes certain people from our lives. Many of us view relationships from the perspective of emotional fulfillment, companionship, or convenience. We become attached to individuals who feel familiar, comfortable, or even necessary to our daily routines. And when those relationships are disrupted or removed, it can feel like a form of divine abandonment. But what if such losses are not rejections, but revelations? What if God, in His sovereign love, is less interested in how cozy we feel and more invested in who we are becoming? Comfort is fleeting, and often it blinds us. It can keep us stagnant. It allows us to remain unchanged in situations where growth requires movement, challenge, and sometimes even loss. The people around us have great influence on our thinking, our behaviors, and our spiritual posture. Some encourage us toward light, while others pull us gently or forcefully into compromise, mediocrity, or sin. But we don't always see it that way. We hold on because we value loyalty or fear loneliness. And God, in His eternal wisdom, sees what we cannot see. He sees where the relationship leads, the slow drift of our heart, the way our purpose begins to dim in the shadow of wrong company. So He steps in, and sometimes that divine intervention feels like betrayal, when in truth it is protection. God's ultimate goal for every soul is not comfort, but transformation. This world is not our home, and our time here is not for building castles of ease, but for being shaped into the likeness of Christ. If someone's presence is keeping you from becoming what God designed you to be, then God will act. And that action may look like confusion at first, a sudden falling out, a distancing that you cannot explain, a connection that fades despite your effort to keep it alive. But behind that painful moment may be the hands of a loving Father who knows that the friendship was starting to take root in your identity rather than your calling. Eternal growth means becoming the person God has called you to be, in character, in purpose, in purity, in obedience. It means learning to walk by faith, not by attachment. And for that to happen, He may remove someone whose influence, though subtle, has been steering you in the wrong direction. That friend who seemed harmless but always tempted you to gossip. That companion who agreed with your spiritual apathy rather than challenging you to rise. That partner who fed your pride but ignored your convictions. God is not interested in temporary peace if it costs you eternal progress. When the wrong people leave, your soul often has space to breathe again. You start to see who you are without their constant input, approval, or expectations. It is then that God begins to build something stronger within you. Conviction, clarity, courage. He may isolate you to insulate you. He may remove the distraction so that you can finally hear His voice again. It's not that God delights in your discomfort, but He loves you too much to let you be seduced by short-term ease when eternal glory is at stake. Many people ask God for purpose, for vision, for elevation. but few are willing to release what hinders that purpose. We ask to be used mightily, yet we keep people around who drain our focus, dilute our passion, and derail our prayers. And so God does what we will not. He severs the ties, not out of cruelty, but because He is answering your deeper prayer, the one you may not have had the courage to pray aloud. He is preparing you for what you cannot yet handle, and part of that preparation is subtraction. The pain of losing someone is often the cost of becoming someone. And while it may hurt in the moment, it is also a sign that heaven is active in your life. The comfort God offers is not always in the form of familiar faces. Sometimes His comfort is disguised in disruption. But when the dust settles and the tears dry, you may just find that your soul is stronger, your heart more alert, and your future wide open. Not because everything is easier, but because God chose your growth over your comfort. And that is a love deeper than we often understand. Every soul that enters your life is either a lesson, a blessing, or a distraction. This is a spiritual truth hidden in the quiet unfolding of everyday relationships. Not everyone who walks into your life is meant to stay, and not everyone who stays is meant to help you grow. Some people appear like a sunrise, warming, bright, and full of hope. Others come like a fog, soft at first, then slowly blinding you to your direction. But each person, regardless of their impact, has a purpose. Some are divine gifts, others are sacred warnings. And some are merely mirrors reflecting back who you were in a season now passing. The human heart is often drawn to connection. We crave to be seen, understood, loved. That craving isn't wrong. It was placed there by the Creator. But in our desire for companionship, we sometimes attach ourselves to people who are not aligned with the path God has set for us. It may not be immediately clear. The distractions rarely shout. They whisper. They disguise themselves in charm, in chemistry, in convenience. You may meet someone and feel instantly alive, but not realize that this person awakens old wounds, not new wisdom. And so God, in His mercy, allows time to reveal the truth. Some people come into your life as lessons. These individuals may challenge you, hurt you, disappoint you, or stretch your limits. But they are not wasted. Through them, God reveals what you tolerate, what you fear, what you still need to heal. These lessons are often painful. You may feel betrayed, misled, or even embarrassed by the outcome. But if you allow the pain to become prayer, the wounds will not be in vain. God teaches you who you are, what you believe, and where your boundaries must be. Sometimes, a person's departure is the beginning of your discovery, and the lesson they brought, though difficult, may be the very thing that pushes you closer to your calling. Other people arrive as blessings. These are the ones whose presence carries peace. They don't compete with your purpose. They complement it. Their love does not drain you, it builds you. These souls are rare, and they often come when your heart has matured enough to recognize them. A true blessing doesn't just make you feel good, it makes you better. It sharpens your focus, strengthens your spirit, and lifts your vision higher. These people may not always be loud or impressive. They may not flatter you or feed your ego, but they anchor you. They remind you of God's faithfulness, and when they speak, it resonates like truth spoken from eternity. And then there are distractions. They often seem attractive at first. They may offer you attention, affection, or even admiration. But slowly, they shift your focus. Your priorities start to blur. You spend less time in prayer, less time in purpose, more time trying to maintain a connection that was never meant to be permanent. Distractions are dangerous not because they are always destructive, but because they delay your destiny. They take just enough of your attention to keep you from becoming who God called you to be. The tragedy is not always in losing time, but in losing clarity. And when your spiritual vision is clouded, even blessings can look like burdens, and burdens can look like blessings. Discernment is the gift that helps you sort the voices around you. Not every kind word comes from a kind heart. Not every invitation leads to growth, and not every connection is divinely ordained. But God, in His goodness, will often give you signs. He will unsettle your spirit. He will send subtle warnings. He will make certain doors harder to open and certain friendships harder to maintain. And if you listen, not with your ears but with your spirit, you will sense when someone's season is ending. In His perfect timing, God will rearrange your circle. He will allow lessons to come, blessings to remain, and distractions to fade. You don't have to force it. You don't have to beg people to stay or over-explain when they leave. You only need to stay aligned with God's voice, and He will handle the rest. He brings people into your life with intention, and He removes them with precision. Each soul you meet is a thread in the tapestry of your story. Some threads are bright, some are dark, but all are necessary for the pattern He is weaving. Divine love is not sentimental, it is surgical. To understand the way God works in your life, especially when it comes to removing the wrong people, you must understand that His love is not like human affection. Human love, though beautiful, is often entangled with emotion, attachment, memory, and even fear of loss. We hold on to people because of how they made us feel, how long we've known them, or how we imagine life should be with them. But God's love moves according to eternal wisdom, not emotional comfort. He is not content to see you survive. He desires that you become whole, clean, restored, and aligned with His purpose. And to achieve that, He cuts, precisely, intentionally, and at times, painfully. Surgery is never pleasant. It involves removing what does not belong in the body in order to preserve the body's health. A surgeon is not cruel for cutting, he is merciful. In the same way, God will remove people's habits and influences that may appear harmless on the surface, but are toxic to your soul's development. Divine love doesn't simply pat you on the back and tell you to keep going. It steps in. It intervenes. It exposes. It uproots. And often, that intervention shows up in the form of separation from someone you once thought essential to your happiness. We do not always know who is hurting us. Sometimes the damage is slow, quiet, and invisible. It doesn't always come from loud betrayal or open conflict. It might come from the friend who encourages your complacency, who never tells you the truth about your flaws, who subtly pulls you away from conviction and into comfort. It might come from someone you love who becomes a source of spiritual distraction, not by malice, but by the very nature of your emotional dependence on them. God sees the erosion of your spiritual strength long before you do. And in love, a love that sees the end from the beginning, He acts. When God removes someone from your life, it is not because He is punishing you. It is because He is protecting something in you that you have not yet understood. You may cry, plead, and beg for the relationship to stay, but divine love is not moved by emotion alone. It is not weak or easily swayed. It is fixed on eternity. He knows what this person will become in 5 years, how they will influence your heart, what they will stir up in your mind. He sees the conversations that haven't happened yet, the compromises you would one day make, the pain that would multiply if the relationship continued. So He removes, like a surgeon with a steady hand. This kind of love does not always feel like love in the moment. It may feel like loss, like abandonment, like rejection. But feelings are not the final proof of truth. The same hand that wounds is the hand that heals. And just as a surgeon causes pain for the sake of healing, God may allow temporary heartbreak to preserve your long-term purpose. It is not cruel, it is holy. It is not harsh, it is merciful. When God removes the wrong people from your life, He is not doing something against you. He is doing something for you, and ultimately through you. We often pray for clarity, for elevation, for peace, for a deeper walk with God. But we forget that these prayers often require cleansing. You cannot carry everyone into the next chapter of your life. Some people belong only to the page that has just turned. If you try to bring them into your future, they will confuse your calling. Their presence will create noise that makes it harder to hear God's instructions. And so God, in His divine kindness, makes the cut. It may feel brutal, but it is precise. It is not a careless hacking away, it is a careful, measured separation. Over time, you begin to see the wisdom in what once felt like a wound. You look back and thank God for the people who left, for the doors that closed, for the connections that couldn't be revived. Not because they were evil, but because they were no longer aligned with your purpose. What was once pain becomes perspective. What was once heartbreak becomes healing. God's love is not soft where it needs to be strong. He will not let your soul decay under the weight of sentimental ties. He loves too deeply to let you be less than what He created you to be. Spiritual isolation often precedes spiritual elevation. This is a pattern God has followed with His chosen ones throughout time, though few recognize it while they're in the midst of it. The feeling of being pulled away from familiar company, the quiet drifting apart from people you once leaned on, the uncomfortable silence where connection used to be. These are not random emotional shifts. They are divine signals. God often calls a soul into a period of separation before He brings that soul into a season of elevation. It is in isolation that the deeper work begins. Not the kind of isolation that leads to despair or bitterness, but the kind that strips away distractions and brings clarity to your calling. When God is preparing you for something greater, He often removes the noise. And more often than not, that noise comes in the form of people, not necessarily wicked people, but people who no longer align with the direction He's leading you. You may not understand it in the moment. A friend becomes distant. A loved one grows cold. A relationship that once felt secure now feels strained. And you wonder what went wrong. But nothing may have gone wrong. Something may finally be going right. Because when God elevates you, He does not just add new things to your life. He also subtracts what will weigh you down in the next level of your purpose. Many of us pray for divine promotion. We ask God to expand our influence, to increase our spiritual authority, to use us for His glory. But we don't always realize that such prayers come with a price. Elevation demands refinement, and refinement requires solitude. There are lessons that cannot be learned in the crowd. There are truths about your own character, your hidden weaknesses, and your divine potential that only come to the surface when the voices around you grow quiet. God does not remove people to punish you. He removes them to reveal you to you. In the stillness of spiritual isolation, pride is exposed. Insecurity is confronted. Hidden fears are brought to light. And your dependence on others is slowly untangled so that your full dependence may rest on God alone. For as long as we rely on the comfort of people, we are not ready to carry the weight of divine responsibility. God cannot place you on a platform meant for Him if your heart still longs for the approval of those He's removed. The wilderness is the place where your identity is no longer tied to your company, but to your Creator. It is where you stop being known by your social circle and start being known by your spiritual depth. This isolation is not meant to be permanent. It is a passage, not a prison, but it is necessary. Look through the pages of Scripture, and you will see this pattern repeated. Moses was led into the desert before he ever stood before Pharaoh. David tended sheep in solitude before he ever sat on a throne. Joseph was thrown into prison before he stood in the palace. Jesus Himself withdrew to lonely places before stepping into the fullness of His public ministry. Each one had to be separated before being elevated, not because they were unworthy, but because they were being prepared. And so when you find yourself in that place, when friends drift, when the crowd thins, when your phone goes silent and your room feels too quiet, do not be quick to assume abandonment. Consider instead that heaven is near. Consider that your soul is being shaped for something your eyes have not yet seen. Do not rush to replace what God is removing. Do not panic when familiar support systems crumble. In the silence, God is speaking. In the loneliness, He is leading. In the absence of people, He is drawing your attention to the presence that never leaves. Spiritual isolation is a sacred invitation. It is the hidden ground where deep roots are formed. It is where the noise of the world fades and the whispers of God become clear. It is where elevation begins, not with applause, but with pruning, not with celebration, but with consecration. Those who are called to carry something great must first be willing to walk alone, not forever, but long enough to be emptied of everything shallow and filled with everything eternal. Only then can elevation be sustained, not as a moment, but as a mantle. And those who endure this isolation will look back not with regret, but with reverence for what God built in the silence. What feels like rejection is often redirection. This truth is difficult to grasp in the moment when you're facing the sting of separation, the collapse of a friendship, or the unexpected silence from someone you thought would always be there. Rejection pierces the human heart in ways few other experiences can. It awakens questions about worth, value, and identity. It stirs confusion, disappointment, and sometimes even anger toward God. But beneath the emotional weight of that rejection, a deeper work is often unfolding. A redirection not visible to the eye, but undeniable in the hand of God. For when He removes someone from your path, He is not simply taking something away. He is guiding you towards something greater. We tend to judge moments by how they feel. If it feels painful, we assume it's wrong. If it feels sudden, we assume it's unfair. But God does not move according to our emotions. He moves according to His eternal plan. His ways are higher than our ways, His thoughts deeper than our thoughts. And sometimes what feels like someone turning their back on you is really God turning your face toward a new direction. He allows the detour, not because He is cruel, but because He sees where that road would have led. And in His mercy, He intervenes. There are relationships that appear full of potential. You invest your time, your energy, your affection. You imagine a future with someone, whether as a friend, a partner, or a mentor. You begin to build hopes on the foundation of that connection, and then, without warning, it begins to unravel. The phone stops ringing. The closeness begins to fade. The words become few, and the distance grows. It feels like rejection, and it is, but not always in the way you think. It's not just a person walking away. It may be heaven stepping in, blocking what you couldn't yet see would harm you. Rejection has a strange way of awakening things in you. It forces you to stop looking at others for your validation and start asking deeper questions. Who am I without their approval? What have I ignored in myself to keep their presence? What door is God opening now that this one has closed? Rejection breaks attachments, and broken attachments often clear space for revelation. In the pain of parting ways, a person begins to understand their own voice, their own purpose, and their own direction. The H of losing someone is often the space in which God begins to speak more clearly. Redirection is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. A conversation that never happens. A plan that falls through. An opportunity that once looked certain suddenly vanishes. You may feel forgotten, left behind, or unseen. But redirection is often hidden in the ordinary disappointments. The door that didn't open may be the one that would have led you away from your calling. The person who didn't choose you may have kept you from becoming who you were created to be. What you interpret as failure may actually be God's protection from a future not aligned with His will for your life. In Scripture, many of the great turning points came after rejection. Joseph was rejected by his brothers, sold into slavery, and forgotten in prison. Yet every rejection became a redirection toward the palace. David was overlooked by his family, hunted by Saul, and betrayed by close friends. Still, each rejection positioned him closer to his throne. Even Jesus was rejected by His own people, abandoned by those He loved. And yet, through that rejection, salvation was made possible for the world. The pattern is consistent rejection in God's hands becomes purpose. There is a hidden kindness in redirection. It may not soothe you immediately, but over time it begins to shine with meaning. You look back at what once shattered you and realize it shaped you. The people who left made room for the people who truly belong. The silence you once hated became the soil where your spiritual roots grew deep. The no that crushed you turned out to be the yes that freed you. And all along, God was not pushing you away. He was pulling you forward. Rejection hurts. It always will, but it does not define you. It does not diminish your worth or derail your purpose. It is simply a sign that the story is turning a page and the author knows what comes next. You were not cast aside. You were redirected, And where God leads, even painful endings become sacred beginnings. God's pruning is proof of his purpose. Though the word pruning often evokes the image of gardening, its spiritual meaning runs much deeper. Pruning is not about destruction, it is about growth. A gardener does not cut a branch because it has no value. In fact, he cuts it because it does. The branch is alive, fruitful even. But to make it more productive, to ensure it grows in the right direction, the gardener takes the blade and removes what is unnecessary. So too does God with those he loves. He prunes, trims, and removes, not out of wrath, but out of wisdom. And often, what he removes are people. When God has a purpose for your life, he is relentless in his commitment to it. He will not allow distractions, relationships, or attachments to grow so thick that they begin to choke out your destiny. His pruning is precise. He sees what you don't. Where we see companionship, he may see compromise. Where we feel comfort, he may detect complacency. So he begins the process of removal gently at times, suddenly at others. People you depended on begin to fall away. Relationships that once seemed full of promise begin to shift. And in your heart, it may feel like you're being broken. But in reality, you're being refined. We often pray for God's will, for clarity, for expansion of influence or spiritual depth. But rarely do we consider that the path to these things includes letting go. Pruning is not optional if you want to bear the kind of fruit that lasts. In John 15, Jesus says that every branch in him that does bear fruit will be pruned so it can bear more. That means even fruitful branches are not exempt. You may be walking in obedience, doing good, even growing, and still find yourself in a season where God is cutting things off. That's not failure, that's favor. God prunes relationships because he sees their trajectory. Some people are only meant for a season. Others are meant to stay, but not in the role they once held. Still others were never truly aligned with your spiritual purpose, but were tolerated because of shared history, emotional comfort, or fear of change. But God is not moved by sentiment. He is moved by purpose. If someone is hindering your growth, even unknowingly, he will intervene. And while it may feel like abandonment, it is actually attention. God is paying close enough attention to your soul's future that he's willing to allow temporary pain for eternal gain. The process of pruning is deeply personal. No two people experience it the same way. For some, it may be a slow drifting apart from a close companion. For others, it may be a sharp and sudden severing. It could be a breakup, a betrayal, a conflict that cannot be resolved, or simply a growing silence. However it comes, it rarely feels holy in the moment. It often feels like something has gone wrong. But the absence of peace in a relationship can sometimes be the presence of God saying, "This is not my will for your next season." One of the most painful aspects of pruning is that it often affects people we love. It's easy to release toxic, harmful individuals. But what about those who were kind, supportive, familiar? Even they can be removed if they are not part of where God is leading you. That's because pruning isn't about good or bad people. It's about the right people for your purpose. A branch can be healthy, but still grow in the wrong direction. And a relationship can feel right emotionally while being wrong spiritually. God sees what you cannot, and so he acts. If you trust him in the pruning, you will come to see its fruit. You will begin to notice growth in areas that were once stagnant. You will hear His voice more clearly without the noise of conflicting influences. You will find strength you didn't know you had, drawn from the places that were once entangled in dependency. The pain of being cut back eventually turns into the joy of bearing more wisdom, more peace, more clarity, more purpose. Every person removed was making space for the right ones to come. Every silence created was an invitation for deeper intimacy with Him. Every closed door marked the beginning of a better one opening. God's pruning is not punishment. It is preparation. It is a mark of His deep investment in your future. It means He's not done with you. It means He's making room for more. When God begins to remove the wrong people from your life, it may not feel like divine love at first. It may feel like abandonment, rejection, or confusion. But in His eternal wisdom, He is not harming you. He is healing you. He is not taking from you. He is making room for what aligns with your purpose. Every lesson, every loss, every silence, and every separation carries the fingerprints of a God who sees what you cannot. His love is not sentimental. It is strategic. He prunes what cannot stay, redirects what no longer serves, isolates to prepare, and elevates through obedience. What you thought was the end may simply be the beginning of something greater. Trust the process, even when it hurts, because God never subtracts without planning to multiply. If He is taking someone out of your life, it's because your future no longer needs their presence. Your destiny demands more, and He loves you enough to protect it.